wants to be king!
While the chosen few are able to claim direct, legitimate descendants from nobility, most of us weren't lucky enough to have been selectively bred like show dogs, and sadly have to count ourselves amongst the unwashed masses. Thankfully, though, Crusader Kings 3 allows us all to experience what it's like to rule by divine right. However, it turns out the life of a monarch isn't all fancy feast and maiden slaying. This is Thorstein of Dust, the chieftain of Throndheimer. Like many chieftains before him, Thorstein had ambitions of uniting the disparate clans and declaring himself king of all Norway. Eager to turn his dreams into reality, Thorstein quickly got to work declaring war on his fellow chieftains. However, Thorstein would soon be met with some troubling news. While leading his army, he received word that a raiding party had landed in Throndheimer. However, Thorstein refused to abandon course and with a heavy heart told his men to march onward, promising them that they would have their revenge at a later date. The men of Throndheimer would take out their fury on the opposing armies, and within a year, Thorstein had claimed 2 new villages as his own. After giving his troops time to recover, Thorstein then assembled a raiding party of his own to terrorize his neighbors, making sure to pay special attention to the holdings of Hrodgar, the coward responsible for the sack of Throndheimer. The raiding party would travel as far as the Northern Isles before heading back to show off their plunder. Once home, Thorstein would call for a thing and officially declare himself the Jarl of Throndheimer. Shortly after this, he would leverage his newfound status to secure a marriage with Saga Truthspeaker, which both ensured an alliance with her father, Afdan the Jarl of Jorvik, and that Thorstein's offspring would be able to claim direct descendants from the legendary hero Ragnar Lothbrok. Thorstein would celebrate his nuptials by conquering more lands for his future children to rule over. His military cunning and combat prowess were quickly becoming renowned by his allies and feared by his enemies. Following his recent campaigns, he even learned that the small folk had taken to calling him Thorstein the Lion, a moniker which he did little to discourage. And it wouldn't take long before the lion and his lioness produced a little cub for the realm to fawn over in the form of their first daughter. There was little time for festivities though, as Thorstein found himself being called upon for military aid by Afdan. The lion eagerly pounced at the opportunity to showcase his might. However, Thorstein wasn't against using a soft touch when necessary. When him and his men were out fighting alongside Afdan, he orchestrated a well-placed bribe to convince one of his neighboring chieftains to bend the knee and swear fealty. And there was also a gentle side to the lion. After Thorstein and Saga welcomed their second daughter, he would save his wife from an intruder, and the event would bring the two closer together than ever before. Still, while fatherhood might have brought about a new maturity, it did little to soften his resolve to become king of all Norway. Of course, becoming king is quite a costly endeavor, and most of the men of Throndheimer had little intention of toiling away in the fields. Ireland, Spain, and Wales would all quickly learn just how sharp these lion's claws were. Upon returning home, another insightful chieftain would bend the knee to Thorstein, but the others weren't as willing to acknowledge him. While he could have conquered them all one by one, that would have been extremely time-consuming and produced a lot of unnecessary bloodshed. But as everybody knows, the quickest way to earn respect in a room is to pick out the biggest guy and punch him right in the mouth. And the biggest guy in the room right now, aside from Thorstein, was his neighbor Jarl Dag. Thorstein declared war against Dag, and he knew his campaign was blessed by the gods when he received news that Saga had given birth to a pair of twins, including a son and his new heir, Ragnar. Dag and his men would prove to be no match for Thorstein, and after being imprisoned, the proud Jarl had no choice but to abdicate and accept terms for surrender. News of his impressive victory must have spread quickly too, as Bjorn Ironside would strike up a conversation with Thorstein during a feast, and the two kings would prove to be fast friends. The respect between the two became apparent for all to see when they announced an official alliance between House of Munso and House of Dust. Now, with the full might of Sweden behind him, and given another sign from the gods, in the form of a second pair of twins, which also brought about a second son, Thorstein decided the time was right, and on April 5th, 880 AD, at the age of 31, he named himself the King of all Norway. Just as he had predicted, all of the various chieftains he had spared obediently fell in line and acknowledged him as their rightful liege. Sadly, during all of this, Bjorn Ironside had died, and his son Eiríkur had ascended to the throne. Thorstein possessed no real love for Bjorn's son, however a war with Sweden was the last thing he needed at the moment. So Thorstein proposed that they exchange hostages with one another in good faith, and was relieved when the offer was accepted, as this left him free to do the one thing he had truly desired: raid with impunity. From his holdings in the Northern Isles, he was able to quickly strike against Scotland, England, and Spain, and the terror that people felt when they saw his ships pulling up to their shores soon became the stuff of legend. Of course, such accomplishments often inspires envy in others, and though Thorstein had deep ties to most of the sons of Ragnar, there was still one who he had no connection to, one who felt that Thorstein's efforts to become king of all Norway had overshadowed his own attempts to avenge his father in England. And so Ivar the Boneless declared war against Thorstein, seeking to claim the lion's holdings in Ireland as his own. Thorstein decided that this was a good time to make the union between Norway and Sweden a little more concrete, and married Ragnar off to one of Bjorn's daughters. With House of Monso and House of Dost once again united, Ivar the Boneless was quickly crushed under the might of their combined armies and forced to relent. Now that Ivar had been dealt with, Thorstein could once again focus his attention back on raiding, and these rumors he had heard of some faraway land containing unknown riches known as Roma. The Lion assembled the largest raiding party in living memory and began the long voyage rounding the coast of Spain and crossing over into the Mediterranean Sea before finally settling upon their destination. As you can imagine, the papacy weren't too thrilled about having Thorstein's great heathen army showing up at their doorstep, and kidnapping the Pope's brother only to ransom him back for a hefty fee certainly didn't help the relationship between the two sides. However, tragedy would soon fall upon House of Dost, as his home was soon stricken by an outbreak of smallpox, and even his daughter Freydis and his wife Saga weren't spared from the effects. His doctor's unconventional methods would lead to Freydis enjoying a full recovery, and while the initial outlook for Saga was also positive, he soon found himself mourning the loss of his beloved soulmate. After this, the Lion soon became known for his tendency of indulging his thirst. While he would end up getting remarried, it was purely political in nature, as Thorstein and his new wife would never connect the same way that he had with Saga. And there was another cruel twist of fate when his second son, Ogni, was slain in battle. After this, something seemed to change in Thorstein. He rededicated himself to the All-Father Odin, and was known to frequently partake in pilgrimages to holy sites, and would even bury the hatchet with his old foe Ivar when he offered his daughter Aslog as a bride. Yet those who thought that the old lion had been tamed would fast learn that they'd been sorely mistaken. Inspired by the exploits of Ragnar, Thorstein would stage his own sack of Paris. He also continued to expand his holdings in Ireland, eventually styling himself King of the Irish. And when Thorstein learned that Ivar's son Berid had imprisoned Aslog and forced her to be his concubine after succeeding his father, Thorstein wasted little time orchestrating a way to free his beloved daughter from her captor. Yet it turns out that the gods weren't done playing their jokes. While his daughter Freydis had successfully recovered from her bout with smallpox as a child, her eagerness to live up to her family legacy would lead to her being slain in a duel. This would prove to be Thorstein's breaking point, and his son Ragnar soon received word that his father had drank himself to death while out on a hunting trip. From Norway to Ireland, the death of the old lion was mourned by his citizens, but beneath the sorrow there was also an undercurrent of tension. While Ragnar had ascended the throne and taken his father's place as the king of all Norway, it was his half-brother Asbjorn who inherited the Irish crown. Many believe that a civil war was inevitable, and that the two brothers may end up tearing apart everything their father had spent his life building. What is up people, Dusty here, and I hope you all enjoyed this video, although if you didn't, I have no idea why you're still hanging around at this point. If you did enjoy it, then leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to see the story of House of Dust continue, then make sure to let me know down in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.